Today's video, we're following up from the one that was done, almost a couple of weeks ago now, about what makes for a good equality assessment. I promised you to come back and talk to you about creating the conditions for learning and insight from doing equality assessments. So let's get straight into it. A bit of a recap first before we do about not just what the ingredients are, and if you want to remind yourself what they are, then I suggest you go back and have a look at that. But why do we even assess equality, and why, importantly, might learning from doing assessments, why is that really important? Imagine a scenario where your organization, your partners that you work with, are doing all of these equality assessments, and really, I think the important thing is that sometimes you might want to stop and think, okay, how well are we doing here? Is this actually adding any value? Is it helping us make good decisions? All of the things that you would have seen in the previous video. Is this actually happening? And what are we learning from it? That's the key thing here. So the other thing about why learning will be good is that actually, if because of the public sector equality duty as a public authority that you may work for, as you've got to show due diligence against that public sector equality duty, then being in a position where you can take a step back and say, this is what we are learning and this is what we need to develop as an organisation to help us improve our due diligence against the Equality Act. Taking a step back, auditing your assessments, for want of a better word, and learning from them overall for however much time you've been doing them. Learning from them is really, really important. The only reason that's really, really important is that if you are exploring about how well you are doing assessments and what value you're getting out of it, you're creating the conditions to share learning with others, maybe just within your organisation, but partners as well. So that's just good practice. Now I'm going to get to in a moment about what kind of toolkit might help you explore how to learn about how well you're doing assessments. And it's going to apply to any type of equality assessment that you do. And I think the reason why I thought it helpful to share this with you is that I know for myself, I see evidence sometimes of maybe equality assessments not being done consistently. There are loads of different types of assessments to do. They all follow some similar principles. In the main, they tend to look at the protected characteristics around the Equality Act, around things like gender, ethnicity, and race, etc., etc. But it's probably fair to say that they are applied inconsistently. There's varying different levels of knowledge, skills, and confidence about completing assessments. And sometimes I think people fall foul to some kind of straightforward errors, especially if they're trying to do the assessment on their own. One of the, I suppose, big issues around doing assessments in the arena of equality is that sometimes there is evidence of them being done as a tick box exercise. And that's not helpful for you or for anyone. And it's probably quite frustrating if doing assessments is a routine thing for you and you're trying to lobby and influence decisions that are being made, which are going to impact citizens and people that you're trying to support. And one big reason, I suppose, for looking to learn from doing assessments is really a response to question marks over, are the assessments actually informing decisions or organisations making? If they're not, and you're going to committees, you're speaking to, I don't know, executives, different types of managers involved in shaping the design and delivery of things that you are delivering for the public, if those assessments aren't truly informing that, then something has gone wrong. So what do we do? What we can do is consider some type of toolkit which helps us explore how well assessments are done for your organisation. So what I'm going to do is two types of scenario here. I want you to imagine the first scenario, that your organisation is completely new to doing assessments, or it's considering launching a new type of assessment for addressing inequalities. those sort of that scenario. So recap. Imagine a scenario, your organisation is completely brand new to doing assessments, it's never done them before, or it's been doing them and it wants to launch a brand new equality assessment process. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share this on the screen. It's probably the best way to do it. I'm going to run through something which is called an equality assessment learning toolkit. I could think of a better name for it or something funky, but I can't. So I'm going to run through some open-ended questions with you, which are going to help gauge, in this first scenario, help prepare for embedding equality assessments in your organisation. That's the first thing I'm going to do. And then when it comes to it, we'll go on to the second scenario. So let me just share my screen. There's no other better way of doing this than using Teams. It's a bit glitchy sometimes, so bear with me. Here we go. Here we go. That's showing on the screen now. So this is called the pre-implementation review section. And what it says is that learning anything new can be daunting. It's made a lot easier with planning and support. So if you're new to equality assessments or you're launching a new type of equality assessment, these open-ended questions are going to help you, hopefully, get more value out of doing that. So this assessment, by the way, is not done for individual equality assessments. It's done for a whole organisation or a team or function. That's the big difference here. It's not for individual assessments of services or policies. It's for the entire shebang. Okay. So get yourself a team together, a policy lead for equality. Don't do this assessment. So don't use this learning toolkit on your own. The whole point is it's a collaborative process. It needs to be co-produced. That would be the first cardinal sin if you try to do this on your own. And the first question it asks is, what does the use of equality assessments actually mean for your organisation, your team or your functions, whichever it is that's applicable? Why are you even doing it? And it's not just because, it's because of the public sector equality duty. What is actually in it for your organisation? What's the context? So here you talk about your services. What are your values around addressing inequality? And yeah, really get to the heart of why are we even doing it? The second one is around staff development. So have you got some specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and timely objectives to ensure staff learning how to use equality assessments are actually able to do so? So if you've got things in your OD plans, your personal development plans. Thirdly, what do you do currently to embed assessments and how effective is it? So this goes back to the thing about if you've been doing assessments before and now you're in a scenario where and you know what, and you're like, right, I'm going to just launch a new one, or maybe you're setting up a new team, for example. This question is really relevant for that. What's your plan for embedding the use of assessments? So for this, I'm going to skip to the appendix section, and here it talks to, when we talk about planning, there's some useful tips here on right. It says, right, okay, what about your leadership and governance? If you're developing a policy aligned to using equality assessments, have a think about these kind of key things here in terms of updating other policies or having a standard assessment template. What training are you going to put in place? Are you going to do any kind of workshops? Or are you going to have an assessment toolkit like this with guidance about how to prepare for launching doing assessments? And what processes are you going to be for embedding it and monitoring it as well? So those are the kind of planning questions. Let's jump straight back up to the assessment, shall we? Here we go. So that's the resource section. It does exactly what it says on the tin, really. There's a little link in there. If you launch that, it talks through the kind of things you might want to consider about resourcing it and explains it in the appendix. And the last two, pretty straightforward. Who's responsible for delivering the plan for launching the use of equality assessments, and how are you going to actually make sure that you're going to get delivery of what it is you wanted? And when we're saying that, it's delivering what's within the planning of doing this and the resources as well. How are you going to make sure that's actually going to happen? So that's the first scenario. That is the scenario of questions to ask yourself if you are new to equality assessments, haven't done it before, and you're planning it, or you're I don't know, you're looking at launching a new process altogether for a certain team or function. Now, the second scenario. This scenario is relevant to organizations who have been doing assessments since the dawn of time, for a number of years. Dawn of time, crikey, that would be 5 billion years ago. That's how old the planet is. But yeah, a really long time. And these are going to be reflective questions, that are going to really peek into, right, how well have you been faring? How much value has it been adding in using your quality assessments? So this is the post-implementation set of questions. Let's jump back into this. It's labeled as the post-implementation review. It should be completed after you've implemented your quality assessment process, and it suggests to be reviewed biannually. It's really up to you, but it definitely does need to be reviewed because things do change. Your use of the quality assessments will mature, people's confidence will grow, hopefully. Decisions will be made for lots and lots of different services. So this is why it does need to be reviewed. So this scenario, it's split into different sections. Firstly, it says for training, how did you make training available? So note straight away, it's a very reflective question. How did you make training available? What have you learned? And how effective was it? Simple as. Secondly, to what extent is your organisation ensuring use of the quality assessments is part of their organisational development plans? So it links back to the question that was asked in the previous scenario. That's it for that section. Nice and easy. This looks at application. So this question's in what circumstances have quality assessments been used? So for this, you might want to refer to certain services or policies that you've been focusing on. It doesn't have to be all of them. Just describe what are the main ones you've been focusing on. That's a really, really good first question. Second one, considering the question in the pre-implementation review, if you completed it, what does the quality assessments mean for your organization? This one's really, really good. It's basically saying, were the expectations you had about what equality assessments mean, were they even realized? Did you even get out of this what you planned in the first place? It's a really important question. Next question, to what extent do you complete equality assessments in collaboration? Remembering in previous video, we looked at effective assessments for equality are done in partnership and they're co-produced. So this one is challenging you to think about, well, how well are we doing this? This is why this learning toolkit needs to be done together. This is probably the most, I'd say, complicated question in the toolkits. So it says where you've used census information for things like different protected characteristics or different profiles of your population. When you've done that, to what extent have you broken that down by the different protected characteristics where you're able to? That's the first question. And the next one, where you're doing an equality assessment that's helping to frame and identify equality objectives, how smart are they? So how are they actually framed? What was the baseline that you identified in any data? And what actual evidence have you got for that in the assessments that you're doing? These things are really, really tricky to tackle, and they make the difference between really good quality, professionally undertaken assessments to ones that need some more work, need to become more progressive, and need to really get at the heart of how you've identified a problem that's impacting parts of your population, how you're then using intelligence and insight that to help identify what decision needs to be made to start to impact that area of inequality. Hopefully that makes sense. The next question, when you're doing assessments, they should be iterative and updated. To what extent do you publish updates to the public and about equality information all year round? So the reason this is in here is that a lot of public authorities are mandated, they have a statutory requirement to do annual statements of their public sector equality duty. And that's fine. In my experience, that tends to be quite safe bread and butter territory for public authorities. However, it is best practice The Equality and Human Rights Commission would back this up. It's best practice, and actually it applies to all functions of your public authority to show all year round compliance with the equality duty. The reason for that is the equality duty isn't something which is only considered annually in the month of May, for example, when your financial year is closed. It's an all year round function, and it applies to all functions of your public authority. There are none that are excluded. All of them are. So this is really, really important. So what this is doing really is this is asking, when you're doing equality assessments, are you thinking about publishing them? Are you making it clear that this isn't a finished piece, that other pieces of work are being done to inform progression of the assessments? And are you making that really, really clear to the public? So the questions here, if you're stuck on this, are updates restricted to being annual only? Are you making the assessments made prominent on your website? Have you got any challenges for doing specific parts of the assessment, which is going to be a given? I mean, that does happen. If there are challenges, are you publishing on why you can't provide information yet, and what you might have, what you might have planned in future? It's perfectly reasonable for public authorities to publish interim statements about things that they're working on, because they can't answer all of the questions that an equality assessment asks. This is why a good equality assessment is iterative. It has to be by its very nature, because you won't know all of the answers to all the questions straight away. You can't possibly do that. It's not really feasible. So these questions, the next three, are all quite similar. It's how far do your assessments consider, one, the wider determinants of health and well-being, and things like geography, inclusion health groups, and there's examples of those in the appendix, and the relationship between those things, i.e. the intersectionality. This one does throw people, but this is why these questions are in this learning toolkit, because it helps you explore how far your assessments are considering these things, and what you might need to improve on overall when you're doing your assessments. Next section in the post-implementation learning toolkit is, what processes do you put in place to review your assessments periodically? If you've got action plans, how far are they followed up, and what do you learn about the effectiveness of them? What have you learned about inequalities following completion assessments? What might you do differently next time? And are you able to share evidence of assessments which actually change the direction of travel for a program or help to influence a decision? Now, the last question is, how well are equality assessments baked into your decision-making processes? I'm going to click on this little link here because it takes you to something called the Equality Assessment Confidence Barometer. I could probably think of a better title for that. So I need to imagine a scenario where the organisation you work for is doing dozens of assessments. It has different types of committees that need to be in a position to give assurance that those equality assessments are being done within the spirit of how they should be, and they want to somehow rate that. The reason for having the Equality Assessment Confidence Barometer is to do that very thing, is to secure confidence and to be able to rate how confident they are that inequality has been considered in making a decision. So there's only 5 questions in this that a board or a committee can ask itself. How's the problem we're addressing been framed right? How assured are we that we know the inequalities are being addressed? There's a RAG rating for that, and a reason as well. Is it clear we know what's going to be done to address the inequalities, i.e. what we're going to do to actually reduce it? This one's been ragged in this scenario, amber, because we might want to undertake more of an involvement exercise with the public. Thirdly, other actions we need to take clear. I can't get my words out. Are the actions we need to take clear and smart? In this example, the assessments have been looked at and the board or committee has said, right, we want to have a wider review from other partners because they're going to have a different lens, and they're saying that they want to be more inclusive in making sure the actions they're taking are clear and smart. The fourth confidence barometer question is, do we have clear monitoring and improvement measures to gauge if we're being successful? In this example, we're saying we've got some concerns over gathering protected characteristics data. Uh, that's why it's rated as red. And then the last one would be in the scenario where you are taking an update to your board or committee, and the assessment is in full display, and they're asking that golden question: are we actually seeing a reduction in the inequalities that were identified? So, is there improved access? Is there improved experience? Are there improved outcomes in the groups that you identified? If a board or committee are not confident in asking these questions, then doing the assessments almost becomes a futile exercise. So it's really, really important, I think, to have some conditions where you can really think about giving your boards and committee confidence to challenge the assessments. I think that's really, really important. So let's flick up back to where we got to before. We got as far as the impact section. We're almost there. These questions ask to what extent has the assessment helped improve quality of your services? So if you're designing policies or programs or services, how has it helped to improve that? Are there any changes in decisions that you've made in doing the assessments? So, for example, if you change an approach, have you consistently made reasonable adjustments for certain types of your population or certain parts of your population? Where have you published your assessments? Are you consistently doing that? And then the last question is, are there any observations or lessons you can share beyond what you've been asked in this learning toolkit? And that's it. I say that's it because it might be quite daunting. You might not have ever done this before, but you know what? Actually, when you are doing something new, which might be quite daunting, asking yourself some open-ended questions about how well you're doing on that is perfectly okay. It's perfectly reasonable. It's going to put you in a place where your organization is holding itself account very transparently around its public sector equality duty, and it's creating some conditions for learning about how well you're doing at quality assessments. It's going to help the people that you work with, your partners, and your own employees, different types of people involved in co-producing these assessments. It's going to help them recognize the value around doing equality assessments because they are really, really valuable. And yeah, investing time in it in a way that doesn't think about how it's going to approach that and plan for that, it's going to lend itself to you becoming frustrated and it being a tick box exercise as well. So that's an equality assessment learning toolkit. I'm going to make available the questions in the video description for you to use. Use them as far as you want, test them out. The only real way, I suppose, of finding something, if something works, if you ask the right questions. The principle remains the same for anything in life. So, as always, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love you to put comments in the chat, reach out to me directly. Let me know if this is something you've done before. Having some volunteers to test out these questions would be great. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on that, and contact me directly. As always, look after yourself, take care, stay safe. In the next video, we're going to be exploring some completely different things, not around the equality agenda. I'm going to take a bit of a break from that for now, but we're going to be looking at some different themes altogether. But keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, take care, stay safe. See you soon. Cheers.